So we know there's something almost magic that happens when you get your employees into flow state. And this is even more true when you're talking about frontliners who might be engaged in repetitive tasks. But how do you get them there? This week, the 4 things you've got to do to create a flow-friendly culture. Hi everyone, welcome back to 40 Billion Reasons. I'm Max Israel. So we left you with a little bit of a cliffhanger last week. We talked about this guy, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, and the concept of flow state. I love this watercolor done by my colleague, Justine Jams, one of my favorite things. And it was probably the most widely viewed episode yet. If you didn't see episode 8, you can see that and all the other earlier episodes at customerville.com/vlog. You can also just follow me on LinkedIn. Find my profile on LinkedIn, hit the button with the 3 little dots on it, and click follow, and that way you'll get a little alert every time we drop a new episode, which is about once a week. All right, so last week we talked about 3 things. Number 1, how people who find themselves in that great zone where the task at hand is nicely balanced with the skills they've got, find themselves engaged, focused, and totally present. Number 2, how too often frontline workers engaged in repetitive tasks can find themselves what I called south of flow state on that little chart I showed you. And what does that mean? That means they get kind of frustrated, bored, and they start acting robotically. And number 3, we talked about how the key to solving that problem is to moving people kind of north on that chart we talked about. Ironically, making their jobs harder, but not just harder. Getting them into flow state means making their job harder in 4 specific ways. And then, of course, we left you hanging, prompting viewer Stacy Collins to say this. All right, Stacy, so let's get into it. What are the 4 situations, the 4 conditions you've got to create for your people to help them get into flow state? Number 1, you've got to give them a sense of control. Number 2, you've got to give them clear goals and feedback. Number 3, you have to do something to help absorb their attention completely. Keep them focused. And last but not least, number 4, you've got to give them a challenge. So those are the things you've got to do. Okay, a quick heads up to you, Stacy Collins at Boeing Employees Credit Union. We're actually going to break this down and take care of the first 2 of those things today, and then we'll come back and take a look at the second 2 next week in episode 10. All right, let's get to it. I wanted to get some really good real-world examples of this, so I reached out to the CX thought leadership at Verizon. I started with Erin Van Remortel, who's a well-known CX thought leader. And I asked her, Erin, do you got any examples for us of companies who are either getting their employees in or out of flow state because they either have or lack that sense of control? And we were in luck. Erin told me about visiting this big retail bank in the United States and how she sat next to and listened in on these calls with one of their call center agents. And it was interesting. I wanted to know more about that. I wanted to know how that worked. The agent, she says, really has no control. If they've waved over X dollars in the last year, they can't do anything. Really? Even faced with a situation where the family was in crisis or something like that, the agent was just powerless. That, to me, sounded pretty rough. And Erin agreed. She could tell. This is repetitive work, not particularly difficult, and she could just see that the agent wasn't happy, wasn't engaged. What about a positive example? What about somebody who's getting it right? I asked if Erin had any ideas there, and here she had a really good idea. She said, let's reach out to her colleague. So that's what we did. Kerry's a very smart guy, and we wanted to hear what he said. We asked Kerry, do you have any examples of companies getting this right, where they give some more responsibility, give power, make it a little harder, but get a better outcome? And once again, we got lucky. Kerry told us about a big US airline. Things happen with air travel, things go wrong. And when people called, the agents at this airline were empowered to do things to kind of soften the blow. what really strikes me here are two things. Carrie, number one, everyone in the chain has power. Number two, I guess, they're trusted, right? They're trusted to take good decisions, to do what's right for the customer, but also what's fair for the airline. Clearly, this is better for the customer, but as I think about it, I realize this is also a better job. This is the job I would rather have between the bank and the airline. This is just a much better job, isn't it? And that adds up, doesn't it? That does. Aaron, Carrie, you guys are fantastic. Thank you so much for your help today. But look, what did the airline do that the bank didn't? Did the airline make their job easier? Hell no, they made it harder. The airline's employees have to do all kinds of things. They have to do research, they have to look into things, they have to make judgment calls. What's really interesting is these steps also probably cost money, right? So if you think about the money these things cost, that adds up too. But on the other hand, think about the difference in turnover. As Carrie just said, the airline has a significantly lower turnover than the bank. And you have to ask yourself, what does it cost to hire people? What does it cost to recruit, hire, train, and get a call service agent to the point where they can so much as tie their own shoes? Well, there you have it. Now that we've created the first condition where people have a sense of control, let's take a look at the second condition you've got to create. You've got to create clear goals and feedback. And to do that, I reached out to Curtis Kopf. Curtis Kopf is SVP of Customer and Digital Experience at Premera Blue Cross. And look, we know these guys very, very well. They happen to know they have an excellent employee culture. They use Customerville's software in many, many parts of the business. So we know these guys very, very well. So when it comes to goals and recognition, I asked him, how do you do that? They've got kind of an always listening attitude at Premera. It just never really stops. And he says that they consistently analyze at every single touch point what's happening. And they talk about it all the time. I want to know more, though, about how they set goals. This is really interesting to me because it seems that they don't just do it at the front line, they do it for everybody. At all levels, this is just kind of part of their DNA. And here, Curtis made one more point that's just really, really interesting. He told me how important it is, not just goals, but especially recognition, because, healthcare is different than other industries. You're right there at the toughest times, aren't they? Positive customer feedback is really empowering for their teams. It's just a validation of the hard work they do to make that customer experience happen. You can see it everywhere when you're in their buildings. It's really impressive. They've got a wonderful culture. Curtis, you're awesome. Thank you. Premera is a great example, and they do have a lot of frontline employees, but I was curious, what about in cases where you've got kind of people deeper in the organization who are engaged in more varied and complex tasks? Does this still hold true there? Who better to ask than Alec Oleshkovich, a customer experience thinker at IBM. I asked him, given so many people doing such different types of work, who sets these goals? They all do, with a little bit of guidance. But then, how do you keep track? Turns out, there are lots of chances. IBM's a matrix organization, so they have plenty of all-hands calls. My guess is that this makes kind of a year-end wrap-up that much easier to do well. Alec, thank you very much. I appreciate it. All right, so those are the first two building blocks you've got to put in place if you want to have a flow-friendly culture, giving people a sense of control and providing clear goals and feedback. Do you have any experiences in this that you'd like to share? If so, put them in the comments. Something like 10,000 CXers a month see this. So I think they'd like to hear your point of view too. A big thanks to Aaron and Carrie at Verizon, Curtis at Premera Blue Cross, and Alec at IBM. Guys, these are very smart people. Do yourself a favor, track them down on LinkedIn, watch for articles they write and posts that they may make. We certainly do at Customerville. We follow them very, very carefully. Thank you guys for your contribution today. Next week, absorbing one's attention completely and creating a challenge. The last two building blocks of creating a flow state friendly culture. We'll hear from viewers and friends to give us some examples of that at Trek Bicycles and at Microsoft. Looking forward to it. Until next week, guys.